Drafting demonstration, Locator. Hi, thanks for joining us. Now, the first step is to get the paper just right. And so we get this T-square firm up against the edge of the drawing board, and then we line up the paper not to the edge of the paper, but to one of the borders. And then we are fortunate that we have drafting dots, which are very tidy and handy to use. But if you have regular tape, remember, don't set it at an angle that can tear the corner off. Right? And we're going to want to check it before we wreck it because the paper may shift as we go. It's time now to plan the layout. And our goal is to have the views align with the top view directly above, the front view, and the side view directly to the side of the side view, the space between each view being the same, and the space above and below the front and top views being identical, and the space to the side of the views to the border being identical. And that's going to require some math. We'll start with the vertical. We've got 6.5 inches of space to work with, and when we subtract the depth of the top view and the height of the front view, we have 2 inches. We want some room around the border, at least 3/8, so it doesn't get crowded. I'm going to go with a 1/2 inch, and then that'll give us an inch between views, which is tight, but we have to make do. Having established how much space we have between views, we'll use this to calculate the horizontal, which has a lot more wiggle room, if you will. And we find that 3/4 of an inch between the views and the border. Now we're going to lay everything out with some very nice light construction lines so we don't have to erase them later, so that we know where we want to locate the views. And then finally we're going to check it to make sure that we haven't made a mistake because we're human. It's time now to draw the object proper. And the front view and the side view are relatively straightforward with known measurements and angles. The top view, on the other hand, is a different animal altogether, and some of the information we don't have directly. So we have to draw the front view and the side view first, and only then can we complete the top view. Also, please remember to keep your T-square and your triangles tight against each other and the edge of the drawing board. That's the T-square. Otherwise, error starts to creep in. Please remember to make your object lines bold and strong. All right, again, we project over because whatever happens in one view happens in the other views just differently. So you can see I'm keeping the triangle nice and tight against the T-square and the T-square tight against the edge of the table. And now we'll get this nice tidy angle. I know where to stop because I have nice construction lines to tell me how far to go. I often find it's easier to work off the bottom of the T-square because you can see where you're working more readily. And now we'll do the top view, and we're going to project that key inflection point, and we're going to use the scale. Dividers would be easier, but we don't have them at the moment, and measure how far over that top surface goes. And I'm going to stick with some construction lines at first. And now this angle is connect the dots time. Right? It's a irregular angle, if you will. It's not a 30, a 45, or a 60. And now we can complete the rest of the top view. Something I wish to share with you. It is better to put the pencil right where it needs to be and bring the triangle, as I just did, to the pencil than bring the pencil to the triangle. And, oops, I forgot to continue the object line. I will fix it later. But let's review this key idea. It's only from that inflection point where the angle starts in the front view that we can locate it in the top view and then get everything squared away. And the other thing about this is if you ever start doing developments, this is why, because we don't know the actual shape of those surfaces from this drawing, and we'd have to do an advanced technique called a development to learn that. It's a lot of fun. Drafting's a puzzle, and I'll now fix my one mistake. Time to dimension our project. And this is where we go from this is what it'll look like to, and here's how to really make it, because you need dimensions to make something properly. So we've got a combination of dimension lines which show where dimension starts and stops. We have extension lines which show where it's right where it's going to, as it were, and then we have the dimensions proper. And of course, later on, we'll be adding some nice pointy arrows, stabby, not big spoon-like things. As we dimension, try and keep it as neat and as tidy as possible. Remember, the idea is this has to be legible even after it's been reproduced. So we need absolute clarity and very tidy lettering. The dimension lines for angles are not straight, but rather an arc. So I'm using a circle template, and I'm going to figure out which of these circles is probably the best choice to get the dimension to land about where it should be, so it's not too squeezed, as it were. And then the center of the circle, where it's a compass or a template, is the inflection point or the start point of the angle. And later on, I will add an extension line. Continuing on with our dimension, you can see I'm adding the arrows. And you should be able to do it with 3 lines, 2 pointy ones and then one sort of line to fill it in. And I'm adding the extension lines. And you notice they don't quite touch the object, right? And they shouldn't be quite as bold and strong as object lines to help differentiate them. And double check your work, because check it before you wreck it, right, kids? Okay. As we come up, we're going to be a little squeezed on space, so let's talk about some solutions. One way is how do you orient the numbers for your dimension. And while it's nice to have vertical dimensions, have the lettering go vertically, you can also put them horizontally if need be. Another thing you can do if there's not enough space is you can actually put the arrows outside of the dimension. We won't see it here, but I think you will see it another time. And then finally, if you're totally squeezed on space, you actually place the dimension outside of the dimension line and 2 small little arrows to say, well, it would go in there, but it doesn't fit. Okay, time to grade, because we get better by reflecting and evaluating our work. It's very important to get a drawing to be super neat, and I'm going to be a little stricter myself than I would with the student, but there are a few things I really should have chased down with an eraser and erasing shield. Complete, I'm solid. You would expect that from an instructor. Lining up is pretty good, except there's that one extension line, but we'll count that as a neatness issue, so I've now earned a 95. And again, drafting really is theoretically, there's an ideal perfect drawing, and we're chasing that perfection, which is a very different thing from many of the other activities out there.